Good day. I am Jed Irene Mendoza, and this presentation is my paper review about robotics process automation. Actually, this is in partial fulfillment of the requirement for Research Seminar 1, Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Open University Graduate School, Master in Information Technology. So for this presentation, I will be reviewing a study entitled Robotic Process Automation, RPA, Implementation Drivers, Evidence of Selected Nordic Companies. And for the content of my presentation, I have to answer the following questions. Letter A, who have done the work? Letter B, what were their goals and objectives? Letter C, what were their research questions? Letter D, what were their methods in terms of but not limited to? So I will be answering more questions under this section. And then letter E, what were their findings? And letter F, what were the gaps in their studies or findings? So let's start with the first questions. Who has done the work? We have four authors. First is Damian Kedziora. He is from Hanken School of Economics, Department of Marketing, working as a faculty member. And two of his studies were entitled Digital Business Value Creation with the Robotics Process Automation in Northern and Central Europe. Second is Outsourcing of Information Technology and Business Processes in Poland, Motivations and Environmental Factors in 2018. Next, we have Arja Leivonen. She is from JAMK University of Applied Sciences, and one of her studies were entitled Utilizing Robotic Process Automation for Hybrid Workforce in Finance and Accounting Operations in 2019. Third, he is an associate professor at Hanken School of Economics, and few of his studies were Supply Chain Design and Management for Emerging Markets in 2015, and Introduction to the Special Issue Information Technology and Retail toward Omnichannel Retailing in 2014. And lastly, he is a professor of Information Systems at ABO Academy University, and few of his researches were entitled Searching Dimensions and Directions for Digital Innovations within the Insurance Industry, a Knowledge-Centered Approach in 2021, and Transparency-Driven Public Sector Innovation, Smart Waterways and Maritime Traffic in Finland in 2018. Now, for these authors, while doing the study, what were their goals and objectives? Now, before I answer these questions, let me emphasize that the goal of the automation regarding the enterprises or companies is to have people, we humans, to work hand in hand to work with the software robots as a hybrid workforce. So we need to work with them. The workers needs to work with the robots. Well, this will lead to reduced costs for the businesses, for the enterprises, of course, while still producing a very high quality product in schedule within their given time. And RPA, or robotics process automation, will have a massive impacts in corporations and businesses, but because decision-making process related to RPA implementation has not yet been, closely examined, not yet studied further, these are the goals of this research. These are the goals and objectives of this research. Number one, goals. Explore the field based on reviewing academic sources and information reported by multiple commercial sources, as well as validating empirical data gathered from different RPA suppliers and executive business experts. And therefore, their objectives: examine the key decision-making factors related to the implementation of the RPA at Nordic companies in the context of organizational setup and culture. Now, with this, goals and objectives, what were their research questions? So they have four. Number one is, what was the role of IT department in the RPA development? Number two, what decision criteria are used for RPA development? And number three, what are the risks related to RPA implementation? And lastly, how independently do software robots and process automation work? So let's answer letter D. So we have more questions under this section. What were their methods in terms of, but not limited to? Number one, how have they gathered relevant data? Number two, how do they form the data set? And number three, how do they process the data, and or how do they develop the model for the RPA? Let's answer the first question. How have they gathered the relevant data? So according to the paper, the interviewees are employed in managerial or expert roles related to the RPA and represent 4 different organizations based in Finland. So basically, these people have strong practical knowledge and a very good experience in terms of RPA in the financial sector and accounting activities. And these people also have taken part in the process of selecting the automatable jobs as well as the RPA solution. And then for the second question, how is the data gathering set up? So for this, the researchers interviewed 8 experts, referred to as P1, P2, P3, P4 until P8. And 6 of them were interviewed online through Skype video call. And the other 2 were interviewed in person. So these 8 people were booked for an hour. They were scheduled to be interviewed for an hour, but most of the interviews took about only 25 to 47 minutes to finish. So that's a total of 317 minutes of full interview, or 5 hours and 17 minutes worth of interview for the researchers. So of course, these interviews were conducted from September 17 of 2018 to March 11 of 2019. And of course, these experts were interviewed and finished and translated them into English. Okay, and then for the third question, what are the tools or techniques used in data gathering? So qualitative interviewing is known to be unstructured, non-directive, standardized, and open-ended interviewing. So with this, the interviewees prepared the research documents or their own documents that contain very detailed information on their own best practices of selecting activities for automation in their organizations. So that is also why the interview is semi-structured, which means that the questions are constructed flexibly, or the interview was a combination of strictly formulated questions and more freely designed questions. So these are the sample questions used during the interview rounds. Actually, from the appendix, they provided 10 sample questions, pero I only have 4 questions in my presentation as a sample. So number 1, please describe latest RPA cases you have been involved in. Which business processes have been automated and which ones need further optimizing and robotizing? Next, what has been the best technology for each task and process to be automized? And number 4, which automation process candidates have brought the highest benefit for the organization? Now with this sample questions, how do they form the data set? Of course, this is an interview, so all the interviews were transcribed. This is for the researchers not to miss anything and for them to take note of the important points that the interviewers were saying. And of course, again, for them not to miss anything, since they will be translating the whole interview from Finnish to English. And then, how do they clean the data? Since the researchers interviewed 8 people, 8 experts in the field. Each one of them, of course, have different points emphasized for each questions. Thus, the researchers organized all of this information that they have gathered from the interviews, and they organized it into categories. So this includes skimming, reading, interpretation. And of course, talking about data, how do they process the data? So let me read this. The process combined elements of thematic analysis and content analysis, as the document analysis can be understood as a complementary collection procedure supported by triangulation and theory building. So basically, they use a combination of thematic and content analysis. So this means finding they use this process to find the pattern based on their research questions and all the data that they have. It also means analyzing the content, which in this research is the transcribed interviews, the whole interviews that they have transcribed and translated into English. And next question, what were the findings? So to answer this question, I want to also answer the research question. Of course, to discuss more of the findings. Let's talk about the first question. What was the role of the IT department in RPA development? So according to this, the IT department was involved at least in the decision making, if not in the actual development of robots. I think it was because for some, it was the citizen developers who were really encouraging their organizations to have this RPA. But mostly this urge from the citizen developers is also for them to increase their own productivity and for the whole team to increase their own productivity as well. While for some, they invited external RPA providers, wherein the only role of the IT department will be to assist in the installation and maintenance. So that's it for research question number 1. Research question number 2, what decision criteria are used for RPA development? So according to this, to increase productivity through eliminating manual labor and highly repetitive tasks, and to achieve cost savings, to free up staff skills for expert tasks, and then again to automate such easy routine tasks. So basically, I think what they want to achieve here is to have less time, to reduce costs, to eliminate mistakes, especially in production, in the process. Now, that is the main criteria that they have found in developing the RPA. And then question number 3, what are the risks related to RPA implementation? So according to this, software robots are particularly vulnerable to such malfunctions because of their high dependence on several layers of underlying systems. When a robot fails, the workers must perform the manual labor again until the robot is repaired, until the robot is fixed. So basically, for the company or for the enterprise, this might cost them a lot of inconvenience, since they have to call the workers again to work to do the manual labor, and of course additional costs for robot repairs, and of course workers compensation. So the inconvenience really. And then for the fourth question, fourth and last, how independently do software robots and process automation work? So most of them said their organizations have automated with the robots solitary steps of processes rather than even attempting to automate the whole process from end to end. Well, most of them they rather have the robots to just manage the repetitive and easiest tasks than to manage than for the robot to manage the whole process from the start to the end. No, it is because of maybe the possible risks, the malfunctioning robots. If you have the robot doing the process from the start to end, and then it will malfunction. Of course, your whole business will go down. The whole process will stop, right? So that is the possible risk. Second, if they are going to have the robots to do the process again from start to the end, they will also have to step up, especially in machine learning and artificial intelligence. So for the conclusion, our findings suggest that RPA is mainly perceived as an operational tool to automate and improve internal processes with little consideration of its strategic and external impact, including impact on customers and service quality. So basically, this means that the organizations just look at the RPA or the um, robotics process automation as a tool that can improve their process, that can help their workers to be more productive and to do more productive tasks. So that's the conclusion. Now, for the last questions that I will be answering in this presentation, what were the gaps in their studies or findings? So they have written this in their paper, I think in findings section, the FTE criterion. Another outcome of using only the FTE criterion for decision making is that strategic applications for RPA were entirely missing in our data set. Well, this is even though most of the interviewees emphasized the word productivity for their workers, especially, the workers now are not assigned in doing the repetitive manual labor tasks anymore, and they mostly spend their work hours just inspecting the work of the robot, the product released by the robot. Still, this is missing, entirely missing. And I think that is the end of my presentation about my paper review in robotics process information. Again, I am Jed Irene Mendoza, and thank you very much for watching my presentation.